Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
America is back.
Illinois Congressman on President-elect Joe Biden's transition and top administration members named today.
You hear about Chicago, you don't hear about Princeton, Illinois.
Rural hospitals that skipped the first COVID surge are now dealing with it big time.
We lost a trailblazer for the Latino community due to COVID-19.
And that trailblazer was Maria Cerda. We talked to her son about her legacy in Chicago and nationwide.
The host of The Doctors, Dr. Ian Smith, on how the show has responded to COVID-19, hopes for a vaccine, and his transition to writing crime fiction.
I'm Angel Ito, and tonight I'll have more from Montrose Harbor, where we're searching for beach glass.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
And musician Andrew Bird on his new holiday album and shooting his first ever acting role in his old Chicago stomping grounds. But first, some of today's top stories. City council members passed the city's $12.8 billion budget today by a vote of 28 to 22. It was an unprecedented show of defiance from aldermen who rejected Mayor Lightfoot's plan to close a $1.2 billion deficit caused by the pandemic. The mayor wheeled and dealed to get this budget through council committees, though, and today she touted it as a reflection of the city's values.
Our values of equity, transparency, and inclusion shine through this budget like a beacon of hope to our residents who are most in need. What we have done this year to stand up and make sure that we leave no vulnerable resident behind continues into 2021 with the passage of this budget.
The budget will increase sales and property taxes by $76 million, eliminate more than 1,900 jobs, and borrow $1.7 billion to refinance existing city debt. Drivers will also notice a higher gas tax from 5 to 8 cents per gallon. Find out what else is in this budget and how some aldermen responded by visiting our website. More than 9,400 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus in Illinois since yesterday, and another 125 people have died. Illinois has seen more than 674,000 total cases and 11,677 people have died. The state's test positivity slips slightly today to 12.4%. State Public Health Director Dr. Ngozi Ezike says as the number of patients hospitalized with COVID seems to be a bit lower, she hopes it's a reflection of people being more careful.
Having over 6,000 COVID patients in the hospital, 1 out of every 4 patients in the hospital has COVID. The increase has been a little bit slower than last week. Thank you for noticing that. I want to be cautiously optimistic, but I don't want to put too much out there.
Ezike adds that the state still hasn't seen the effects of the Tier 3 mitigation measures that went into effect Friday, and of course they'll still be eyeing those numbers closely after Thanksgiving. Amanda Vinicky has more on the status of hospitals and bed availability in the state coming up in a few minutes. And now back to Paris and 4 Illinois lawmakers on the presidential transition. Paris.
Brandis, it's been a rough transition for President-elect Joe Biden, with President Donald Trump and his team fighting the election results in court and on Twitter. Here to talk about the transition, stimulus negotiations, and more are Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democrat who represents Illinois' 5th District, which includes parts of Chicago's North Side and stretches west to Elmhurst. Congressman Bill Foster, a Democrat who represents Illinois' 11th District, which includes parts of Aurora, Bolingbrook, and Joliet. Congressman Rodney Davis, a Republican who represents Illinois' 13th District, which includes Springfield and southwest toward St. Louis. And Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a Republican who represents Illinois' 16th District, which includes 14 counties and stretches around from Illinois' northern to eastern borders. Gentlemen, welcome all of you back to Chicago tonight. We've got a full slate, a lot to get to. So I'll start with you, Congressman Quigley. Yesterday, as you know, the GSA Director, Emily Murphy, formally authorized the beginning of the transition process after a lot of public pressure and a delay. Are there consequences to that delay at this point?
Look, I think they can make up for it. It was getting very precarious, and obviously it's important to national security. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and that tradition is extremely important now. At this point in time, I welcome the news. I appreciate the difficult choice Ms. Murphy felt that she had. In the end, as they say, it's never too late to do the right thing. we're looking forward to moving on.
And Congressman Kinzinger, you were one of the first Republicans to congratulate President-elect Biden. You've been one of the most forceful calling out President Trump and his lawyers for spreading baseless conspiracy theories about the election. At the same time, there's a Monmouth poll that shows that 77% of Republicans polled believe that Biden won this election because of fraud. How do you convince your voters that it might not be the outcome they wanted, but it's a legitimate outcome?
So I think it just takes time. I think this is something that in the height of the emotion right now, everybody's upset, they're in their corner, or they're overly, happy, depends on what side you were on. And I think over time, it's important for us to push back on misinformation, to be clear that the most important thing that can happen in a democracy in a republic like ours is that we respect the election and respect the election results. As we know, President Trump had every right to pursue any concerns he had in court, but we've got to move on. We have a long transition period, but it's definitely time to move on with this, and so we're doing the right thing.
Congressman Davis, I haven't seen you make a statement one way or another about the election. Do you acknowledge the results, that Biden is the president-elect?
Well, it looks like as of today, with the Michigan certification, he has gone over 270. But the election is going to be decided officially, like every presidential election, when the electors meet. I got to tell you, I've been busy. I run the House Administration Committee for the Republicans, and I've got election observers in states like California, Iowa, and New York. And it's amazing to me that we've had an entire state presidential race recount in Georgia, and at the same time, we still don't have congressional races decided in places like California and New York. That's the tragedy of this election cycle, and that's what we're going to hope to investigate later as to what we can do better.
As this is happening, President-elect Joe Biden introduced some key members today for who he hopes to be part of his national security cabinet. Here's what Vice President-elect Kamala Harris had to say about this group.
These women and men are patriots and public servants to their core. And they are leaders, the leaders we need to meet the challenges of this moment.
Congressman Bill Foster, Democrats are happy about a return to sort of a more quote-unquote normal foreign policy approach, although wasn't this what President Trump ran successfully on in 2016 against the typical trade deals and foreign intervention?
Yeah, well, and I think that his experiment with putting amateurs in charge has been a failed experiment. When he gets people with no foreign service experience and puts them in charge of foreign affairs, we don't do very well in our negotiations. And unfortunately, American workers, manufacturers, farmers get badly hurt with a failed foreign policy. Same thing in science, same thing in aspects of financial services.
And so all these nominees are going to come down to being confirmed in the Senate. Congressman Kinzinger, do you expect there to be partisan backlash to some of these nominees?
I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a fight. I mean, I think generally President-elect Biden's nominees will be put in, short of any kind of information that we didn't know. But the Senate has every right to really go back and forth and do battle. I mean, look at, what was done under President Trump. But I think the bottom line is, Joe Biden has every right to put who he wants in there as long as there's nothing big and glaring. And the Senate has every right to go through that. So, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a change for sure. My commitment is to try to do my best to work with the next administration, but also be consistent and call it out when I disagree, but do so in a professional way. That's what's missing in politics, is actually being adults about things now on both sides of the aisle, quite honestly.
Congressman Quigley, there are reports right now that President-elect Biden is pushing Congress, especially Democrats in Congress, to come together on a new COVID relief bill. What are you hearing? What's the latest right now?
There are two things I was concerned about after the election other than transition. That's funding this government, because obviously this continuing resolution we have is going to run out, and a long-term COVID care package. We're hearing just minutes ago that first part of that, the funding, the overall funding mechanism has been agreed to, the amounts, the 302Bs. So that's good news. There's bipartisan support, bicameral support. That next one's going to be tougher. Mr. McConnell says he's all in favor of this.
What are the amounts, Congressman?
Well, each subcommittee is differently. But it's a comfortable amount that folks will agree to. So each one of the 12 bills is separate. On the COVID care, that's a different story. I'd like to think we get something done, at the very least, to catch us through February, March. I think my advice to the new Biden administration coming in January is let's do something that takes us through a whole year. Let's give the markets the security and the stability they're looking for. And
Congressman
people
Davis,
who are looking for home security and food security.
it's not just markets that want security, but 12 million Americans are poised to lose unemployment benefits the day after Christmas without new stimulus. Will you support a new bill that provides relief for individuals, businesses, municipalities?
No, that's what I was finishing with.
I'm sorry,
It's
Congressman
housing
Davis.
security, it's food security, it's obviously
I want to
people
get Congressman
losing their...
Davis here. Sorry, Congressman Quigley.
Sorry.
When we've seen bipartisan negotiations come to fruition, we've all supported those pieces of legislation in the past, and that's what it's going to take. But we haven't seen that since April, and that's what's been most frustrating. So I think all of us on this call.
All right, we'll be joined again by these members of Congress later in the program to discuss the future of both political parties as well as the COVID spike and distribution of vaccines. But for now, our thanks to Congressman Quigley, Foster, Davis, and Kinzinger. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. According to the latest figures from the Illinois Department of Public Health, the city of Chicago has 921 intensive care unit beds, and more than 200 are currently available. Now, that's not counting the suburbs, but in some regions, the numbers are much different. In Region 4 in southwestern Illinois, there are 118 ICU beds total, and only 23 are available. Amanda Venneke joins us now with a look at the challenges facing hospitals statewide. Amanda.
Brandis, to put this in perspective, I was at Rush yesterday, and believe me, you can get lost on that hospital campus. But many of Illinois' rural residents are served by hospitals that have only 25 beds or less. These are what the federal government classifies as critical access hospitals, and they're peppered throughout Illinois.
We're here to take care of you. When you're driving up and down those highways and you have to come in a rural hospital, you want to make sure that that's an excellent hospital and that they'll get you to the right place.
Like other hospitals, they're seeing sick patients come through the door, but their smaller size presents unique challenges.
One is that the resources, these small hospitals have limited resources. They don't have 300 medical staff members. They might have, 5 or 6 physicians and nurse practitioners and PAs that help serve that community.
Other issues, larger facilities often get first dibs on things like PPE and COVID testing equipment. Now, in cases, some of these challenges are just recently beginning to manifest, given that the spring surge of COVID cases really was concentrated in urban areas. The president of the hospital in Dixon, and that's a general hospital of an in-between size, says they spent a couple $1 million in the spring preparing for a surge that didn't come.
Within just the last few weeks, that surge has happened. And this time around in the fall, it is dramatically different than what we experienced in the spring.
Dixon Hospital's president says it has been an explosion on all fronts.
Our inpatient census has been high. So we have had times when we've been over 100% occupancy. So you think about how can that happen? But it means that we created 2 patients in one room. Since we haven't done that at KSB since the 1980s. We had full intensive care unit beds with multiple ventilators. We continue to see high volume in our drive-through COVID clinics.
Now, meanwhile, last week, Morris Hospital in Grundy County saw an all-time high of 41 COVID-19 patients. That's more than half of all patients at the hospital. To put that in perspective, Morris has 89 hospital beds total, but some of those are dedicated to things like maternity beds.
So when it comes to medical and surgical patients, it's really about 60 patients we can have. So when you think about it, 40 plus patients out of the 60 beds were COVID positive patients. It's a significant impact on us. Last week, we had to postpone 3 elective surgeries simply because we didn't have beds to put those patients in after surgery.
The chief medical officer at Southern Illinois Healthcare says SIH did see a blip in COVID case increases in August, but then really things slowed down. Lately, though, there's been a steady incline.
We averaged over the summer probably about 10 COVID patients a week that were getting admitted. The last 4 weeks, we've are currently right around a census of between 50 and 60 COVID inpatients daily. So a pretty big increase for us. That puts a lot of stress and strain on our system. And just as we see more in the community, we obviously see more with our employee population too.
The doctor says that having the personnel to staff beds is actually a bigger issue than having enough beds, period. So take, for example, nursing. SIH's chief nursing officer says healthcare facilities have always had nursing shortages, even pre-pandemic.
It requires your coworkers to pick up additional shifts. It also requires for us to not be able to potentially take some patients into beds that we would typically be able to.
And contracting with private agency nurses is not the viable option that it once was either. Hari says that it is a perfect storm. So she says it's a perfect storm. They're talking about the challenges that it presents because coronavirus patients, she says, require extra care and attention from nurses in their wards. So all of the medical experts that I spoke with today say that they fear that things are only going to get worse if people do not abide by warnings and they gather in groups for Thanksgiving.
When you look back to Memorial Day and 4th of July and Labor Day, each one of those weekends, we saw a spike in coronavirus.
And with the numbers that we're seeing now and how our resources are being stretched, I'm concerned at what we're going to see through the month of December. And are we going to be able to continue to serve our community when they come in for anything that they might need?
In hopes of not making that an issue, they are encouraging everyone to share turkey on Thursday with the people that you're probably sharing most meals with these days, the people that you live with. Back to you.
Amanda, thank you. And now to Phil Ponce and the story of a pioneering Chicago family and the devastating effects of COVID-19. Phil.
Brandis, Maria Cerda was a trailblazer. In the 1960s, she became the first Latina member of the Chicago School Board and a pioneering advocate for bilingual classes. Cerda went on to work under multiple mayors, helped start the Latino Institute, and was a mentor for many Latino leaders. She died November 8th at age 86 due to the coronavirus. But now the husband she left behind, a trailblazer himself, and her daughter both have the virus as well. Joining us to talk about his mother's legacy and the impact of COVID on his family is David Cerda, an attorney and son of Maria Cerda and Justice David Cerda. David Cerda, first of all, condolences on the loss of your mother. And
Thank you very much, Phil.
As with many families, the circumstances surrounding her actual passing were difficult. Describe what happened.
Well, she was, first my father was detected as COVID positive and was admitted, and then my mother and sister were tested, and my mother was admitted, and coincidentally they were just a few rooms apart at Northwestern Hospital, but couldn't even see each other while they were in the hospital until the very end. And so I only got to visit with my mother via FaceTime on an iPhone. And I had one conversation with her on a Friday, and on that Sunday I watched her die on this iPhone. And that's a very cruel way to watch your mother pass away.
Sounds horrible. David Cerda, your dad is also a pioneer in his own right. Just briefly describe a little bit about his career.
He was the first judge in Illinois and perhaps the Midwest when he was appointed a magistrate judge in 1965. Then he was the first Latino judge elected in 1968. And then he became the first Latino Illinois Appellate Court justice in 1990. And he also founded while he was a judge, he founded the Mexican American Lawyers Association, which is kind of an interesting thing to do as a judge.
And you indicate that he too has the coronavirus. I understand he was re-hospitalized on Friday. How is he doing now?
He's still in, yes, he's hospitalized today, and hopefully he will be getting out and going to a rehabilitation center either tomorrow or in the coming days.
Did he have to be intubated at all?
No, he did not.
And how is your sister doing?
She's doing all right. She's had phases of extreme fatigue, but she's not needed. She was on the borderline, but she's not needed to be hospitalized. But she's definitely felt the effects of the coronavirus.
And how about you? Are you have you been tested?
No, I physically distance and avoid going. I'm trying to avoid the virus as much as possible. And I also have a situation where my children are very high risk, so I can, very careful.
Well, as you know, last week, Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia had some words to say about your mom in Washington, D.C. Let's see what he said.
Maria Cerda was the first Puerto Rican woman and first Latina appointed to the Chicago Board of Education. In that role, she secured funding for bilingual education programs and culturally responsible curricula that helped children like me, whose first language was not English, succeed.
What would you say your mother was most proud of in her career? Did she talk to you about that?
Well, she told me something I didn't know, that she marched with Martin Luther King Jr. in Marquette Park in 1966, which took some courage because people in Marquette Park in 1966 threw rocks, bottles, and bricks at people of color. So she was proud to have done that. She was proud to, as Congressman Garcia said, bring bilingual education to Chicago schools. She was also proud to have had her assisted our world-famous community organizer, Barack Obama, here in Chicago when she was the director of the Mayor's Office of Employment and Training. She appeared at her office one morning to a loud protest. She asked who's head of this protest. Obama stepped forward. He asked her what he wanted. He wanted retraining for steel workers on the southeast side. She said, well, okay, make an appointment. I'll see you in a week. He came back with his protesters. She thought well of the idea. She secured office space for it. Obama called up later to say what's going on with the facility. She said, I'll get back to you. He called up again when things had not moved forward. And she said, I'll be frank with you. I posted the position twice. I can't find someone to fill it. Obama told her, I'll find someone. Called her back with the name of that person. That person was hired. So my mother told me this story in front of my father and said, look, he protested, he got the commitment, and he filled the position. And so why didn't, my mother was a very colorful woman, and she could be sarcastic at times. And she turned to my father and she said, why couldn't I marry someone who was as handsome, intelligent, and as industrious as that guy? My father said, I love you too, Maria.
Given what your family has gone through.
He was good in all three categories.
Given what your family has gone through, David, what is your reaction to people who still do not take the virus seriously?
It's shocking and appalling. This is a real deal. The latest statistic is that there are 259,641 dead Americans due to the coronavirus, and my mother is the one on that 41. This is a real pandemic. People need to take it seriously. You need to wear masks. We need to prevent the spread of this virus and not rely on a vaccine down the road. We're going into a very tough time. This outdoor-indoor dining should not be allowed. People need to understand that they're not just wearing a mask. They're not just doing it for themselves. They're doing it for other people. And this is spreading like wildfire. And we can't continue to stress our healthcare system and our healthcare workers by not preventing and doing what we can to get through this. We can get through this. Next year, there'll be vaccines. We'll be able to get through it. But we have to prevent the deaths of tens and hundreds of thousands of people between now and then.
David Cerda, thank you so much for talking to us. And again, condolences on the loss of your mother.
Thank you again, Phil.
And back with much more Chicago Tonight ahead, so please stay with us.
Latinos, who make up 1/3 of the population, continue to power a city that works.
These are the people that are working 3 jobs, knowing that COVID is out there. Those are the people that need the help, and we should help them.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including Congress members' take on a potential run for president by current President Donald Trump in 2024. But first, a Chicago artist is working to bring awareness to the homeless community through his artwork, one sculpture at a time. Arts correspondent Angel Ito shares more.
All the pieces of sea glass I find, they're survivors. They're the toughest little bits left.
For Zach Lowing, the hours he spends scouring the beach for reusable glass is about more than the sculptures he turns them into. It's through this platform that he hopes to bring attention to the homeless community.
And I kind of like that idea that they're survivors because, I've been homeless. And some of the greatest people I've met are those survivors. The people that tough it out through unimaginably hard times. A lot of what I do, I guess, is to help people see that the homeless, there's more to them. These days, the homeless are like the furthest point on the marginalized people.
Lowing has been out of work for about 4 months now and spends some of his time making sculptures out of beach glass.
Lately, I've been concentrating more on the browns and greens because I just love the way they look. Anytime I find or see cobalt blue, I pick it up no matter what. You gotta do that, But you also find like milk glass, which is like a pale white. I'm not sure what to do with it yet. You'll find chunks of glass that are like that thick, which I'm not sure what they were. Maybe on a boat, like heavy duty glass. And then you'll find Forenzel lens glass, which has got all the little ridges on it, which eventually I want to do something with that. That'd be really neat. You'll find safety glass with the little wires going through it, and the ends will be rusting inward. It'll leave like a neat pattern on the glass. And on occasion, you'll find what I call shatters. It's a piece of glass that was in a fire, but then they hit it with water, and it shattered, and it looks like a puzzle. And it holds together. It's smooth, but it looks shattered. It's beautiful. It's very rare.
We visited a landfill near Montrose Harbor to see where he finds his material.
So these are a lot of frosted pieces, which is why they're not as transparent. But it's so beautiful.
For collectors, these frosted pieces are the most sought after. But Lowing says he loves transparent glass the most.
Because I'm interested in the way that the light transmits through all these things. You can look at them through your hand and at the light, but with the LED lights, they don't get hot. So it works really well with it.
Lowing says he'll continue to make these sculptures even after he's found work, because for him, it's about the message behind the art.
You gotta help them understand, you gotta plant seeds. And nobody likes an angry man, especially an angry homeless man. I understand that. And so I try to speak out for those people, because I'm not homeless right now, but it's kind of a scar on your body, on your system, on your soul. Much like any other traumatization that might happen in your life, I'll always be at risk.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And since we originally spoke with Zach Lowing, he has found work. You can visit our website for more information on his art. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, Illinois congressman on another possible presidential run for Donald Trump in 2024. The host of The Doctors, Dr. Ian Smith, gives his take on hopes for a vaccine.
You got 30 seconds to convince me not to shoot.
And musician Andrew Bird on his first ever acting role in the new season of Fargo, plus his new album. But first, some more of today's top stories. Cook County commissioners unanimously passed a budget today, a $7 billion budget that closes a $222 million budget hole without additional taxes. Board President Tony Preckwinkle's office says a combination of sources helped. They include $77 million from the reserve funds, eliminating 569 vacant equivalent of full-time positions, a $50 million reimbursement through the Federal CARES Act, and higher than expected revenue from cannabis, gaming, and online sales. A coalition of activists is calling on Governor Pritzker and Mayor Lori Lightfoot to take action to save Mercy Hospital. The group, called the Chicago Health Equity Coalition, includes SEIU Healthcare Illinois and Indiana, National Nurses United, and Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, among others. They say the governor should persuade the hospital's owner to keep it open or to sell it.
Trinity, which owns Mercy Hospital, is not hearing our demands.
Say that.
And we need to meet again because the leaders who might not be able to persuade Trinity to keep Mercy open or sell it to someone who will keep it open need to step up and act now before it's too late.
That's right.
What a time to close a hospital in the midst of COVID-19.
Say that.
For now, the hospital is slated to close in the spring of 2021. And now we go back to Paris with more from members of the Illinois congressional delegation. Paris.
With the current president not conceding to President-elect Joe Biden, is Donald Trump setting himself up for a run in 2024? And what has that done to political norms? Joining us once again to talk about the future of both the Democratic and Republican parties are Congressman Mike Quigley, Bill Foster, Rodney Davis, and Adam Kinzinger. I want to continue on the subject of COVID. Amid debate over stimulus, Congressman Foster, there is exciting news about 3 potential vaccines here from 3 different pharmaceutical companies. When could those get into the hands of Illinoisans, and how many Illinoisans will see the vaccine in this first phase?
Well, aside from just the wonderful news, which really is the result of just the efforts of scientists around the world, and federal career scientists, the scientists in industry, they've all come together. They've been working hard. Congress deserves a lot of credit for the money that we gave them and the explicit directions to do what they've executed very well on. And so there's a lot of good news, and I think there was there was a lot of holding the information tight until just about a week ago, and then we started to get the individual scientists giving us the information about what the real status was on things like delivery times. We're going to see in December, if things go as expected, we're going to see first responders and medical personnel start getting the first of these doses, and probably by the end of January, there will be enough to get most of them done. And then, according to the prioritizations that have been established by the medical associations, looking at the bioethics of this, we're going to see tiers of more endangered people, starting with the elderly, those with significant conditions. And so the hope is that by probably the second or certainly the third quarter, anyone who wants a vaccine can get a vaccine in this country.
And we'll certainly
because of the high effectiveness and apparent safety, I'm really hoping that everyone takes the vaccine as soon as it's allotted to them.
We'll be watching that rollout in the beginning of the year. I want to move to foreign policy for a second. Congressman Kinzinger, in his waning days of his presidency, President Trump has announced a major troop withdrawal from Afghanistan and Iraq. He announced withdrawing from the Open Skies Treaty to do reconnaissance missions over Russian airspace. Your reaction to those moves?
Well, first off, the Open Skies Treaty, I'm fairly in agreement with, because if you actually look at what the Russians put off limits for U.S., but we don't do for them, it's really unfair, and that needs to be renegotiated. But I have very big disagreements with him on what he's doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. The president talks about the commitments he made in the campaign. I respect that. But his biggest promise in 2016 was the defeat of ISIS. And I think the message that this is going to send both to the recruiters in ISIS and to the future of ISIS is not beneficial. And lastly, I think it puts President-elect Biden in a really tough position. He's either going to have to make a decision to withdraw, in which case he will own the consequences. We all know those consequences will be bad, or have to return to the original troop number that we're at today, where there's going to be a whole new news story about, President Biden increasing the number of troops. So I think it's the wrong move, but, he is president now and for the next couple months.
So it does sound like a catch-22, Congressman Quigley. What would you advise President-elect Biden do to continue a drawdown or to draw back up?
Well, let me agree with my colleague about open skies in terms of the problems. But the difference I have with the current president is I wouldn't withdraw, I would renegotiate while we still have those protections. In the end, that treaty is important. The message we've sent since he's been president is to withdraw from treaties. We haven't created a whole lot of new ones since then. And I think the as Madeleine Albright said, you can't lead the world by leaving it. In the final analysis, there is some need to have troops in forward locations, if only to find out what dangers exist out there. In other words, our intelligence operations depend on some military cooperation to succeed and to keep us safe.
All right, let's talk about a little politics. Congressman Davis, there's a lot written about the fact that President Trump, once he leaves office, does want to stay on as sort of the head of the GOP. There's speculation he's going to announce a run for president in 2024. Would he be your choice for the GOP candidate for president in 2024?
Well, there's a long time over the next 4 years to see if he wants to do that. He may enjoy the private sector a lot more than he enjoyed the public sector, but you would have to say right now he would be the front runner. And I think he's got a good record to run on. We talk about foreign policy. Look at what he's been able to do with Secretary of State Pompeo and the Foreign Service to be able to create much more peace in the Middle East. Countries that are recognizing the state of Israel that hadn't happened under any other previous administration.
All right,
a record of economic growth and a record of getting the dollars together and putting the right people in place to actually defeat this virus.
So it sounds like at this point you believe he'd have a lot to run on in 2024. Let's talk about a little bit of local politics. Illinois Democrats right now are split on whether embattled House Speaker Michael Madigan should go on as the leader of the state's Democratic Party. Here's what Senator Dick Durbin said on this program.
We paid a heavy price for the Speaker's chairmanship of the Democratic Party. Candidates who had little or no connection with him whatsoever were being tarred as Madigan allies who were behind corruption and so forth and so on. It was really disconcerting to see the price that we paid on that. I hope he takes that to heart and understands that his presence as chairman of our party has not helped.
Foster, the floodgates have opened here. Do you believe the Illinois Democratic Party is best served with Speaker Madigan here as the figurehead?
Yeah, well, I agree with Senator Durbin that we have paid a tremendous price, and so I think it's correct that Democrats all over Illinois are stepping back and seeing if we actually needed a generational change in that position.
Congressman Quigley, generational change. Someone else should be helming the party.
It looks long overdue. Look, as a 10-year Cook County commissioner, I was asking for a change, not just for the ethics reasons. And we've learned in Illinois that, corruption wears both hats, unfortunately. But I thought we needed a clean slate, not just politically, but his role as speaker to push forward an agenda of reform and economic responsibility.
Congressman Kinzinger, speaking of politics, national Republicans believe that the 2022 Senate seat here in Illinois held by Senator Duckworth could be in play. Is that a seat that you might be interested in going for?
No, look, it's certainly not something I'm sitting around thinking about right now, honestly. And that's not a political answer. I know it sounds like one. I'm focused on, first off, getting sworn in January, as all four of us here are, and really doing what I think is right. Being a Republican in Illinois is not necessarily the easiest party to belong to, so I'll never rule anything out. But quite honestly, I'm not sitting around, giddy and planning and everything, and we'll just see how the things shake out. But bottom line is I'm excited about, doing my 6th term in the House and doing some big things with Rodney and these others, with Congressman Foster and Quigley.
Congressman Davis, it's no secret that the nation is incredibly polarized. There's so much gridlock in Washington. I think there's a big part of the electorate that just does want some of the temperature to come down. What are the things that you think that Congress can compromise on, that Republicans can compromise on with the incoming Biden administration? Issues like infrastructure, COVID relief, anything else?
Yeah, COVID relief, we can defeat this virus. We can make sure we have a good plan to get the vaccine out to every single American at a time that's going to be convenient for the most vulnerable and our healthcare workers. Infrastructure, agriculture, these are big things, but let's not forget what's happening in Illinois. And I'm glad that many of my Democratic colleagues and Senator Courageous, Senator Durbin, who just got elected to a 6-year term, finally, after he gets elected, decides to come out and say that Mike Madigan shouldn't be the party chair. He should have said that before the election. These are the frustrating things for many Illinoisans, and especially the folks in downstate Illinois that I represent, and even the state capitol.
Well, we hope to have you all back on this show to discuss these things and more. It's great to have all 4 of you here, Congressman Mike Quigley, Bill Foster, Rodney Davis, and Adam Kinzinger. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And up next, television doctor and actual MD Ian Smith on COVID vaccines. But first, we take a look at the weather. We're 2 days into the new decade and 2 days into recreational marijuana being legal in Illinois.
All our residents will be subject to a stay-at-home order.
That other pandemic that we're far too familiar with in America.
The best is yet to come.
It ain't over till every vote is counted.
This is far from over.
It's going to take years to really understand 2020.
As the host of The Doctors, Dr. Ian Smith has been covering the COVID-19 pandemic from just about every angle. And as news of vaccines becoming available is a welcome light at the end of this long, dark tunnel, there's plenty of work to be done before these vaccines can help begin our return to normal. Dr. Smith joined us for a conversation on Sunday's Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I began by asking him how the Doctors program has changed both since he became solo host and also amid the pandemic.
Well, it's changed dramatically. First of all, our location. So we shoot on a much smaller stage. We have a much smaller crew. We even have a compliance officer who's in the studio with us, making sure that everyone is 6 feet apart and that everyone is wearing their mask. I'm the only one who doesn't wear a mask, obviously, like yourself when you're sitting there talking to camera, but in general, we're all wearing masks. The other thing is that we've changed the format of the show. It's a faster show. We still cover the X's and O's of medicine, of course, diagnosis and treatment, but we've expanded it to include overall wellness, things like music. Music is medicine, so we have musicians come on and talk about their music and what it can do for people. We have comedians come on who give us a lighter take on the day's health trends. And then we have a book club. My book club is called the Word Power Book Club because we believe that books can inspire and transcend and also help people be distracted from the stress that's been going on.
Of course, and we're going to get to your book in a little bit as well. But we also are, everybody's looking at these couple of vaccines that we know are in the works and that are on the way. What do we know so far about how these vaccines work?
What we know so far is that they're very effective. They're both about 95% effective, which is really good. We don't have all the safety data in, but the preliminary safety data shows that there are very few side effects, definitely nothing of major import to say to people, don't take the vaccine. They're 2-shot vaccines. You take one, then take a second shot for full immunity. But here's the key, Brand. There's 2 things. One is that we have to have 75% of the population take the vaccine for it to be effective for all of us. So you just can't have 10 or 20 million. You got to have 200 million plus people take the vaccine. The second thing is we have to make sure there's proper distribution, that everyone has access to the vaccine. Not only those who are connected, only those who have money, but everyone from all walks of life must have equal access to this vaccine. It's extremely important.
And on that note, you and I both know that many Black people or many Black communities don't necessarily trust the medical community because of some history. Should the medical community be doing more to encourage Blacks to understand that the virus is safe and effective if that's the case?
Absolutely, because here's what's important. You have to look at the history. You look at the Tuskegee experiment, which kind of started the whole white coat syndrome for African Americans. And those, even though that was a while ago, there still is that feeling in the Black community about whether or not we're guinea pigs, whether or not there's some other agenda going on. So yes, the medical establishment must reach out and get African Americans to understand that this is safe, it's effective, and they have to be very transparent. That's going to be important because if you don't have enough African Americans also taking the vaccine, then the population still will not be protected. And this is one of the cases, Brandon, like we've been saying all along, this is about doing it together. You can't have one segment of the population do it and not the other. We are interconnected here, whether people like it or not.
Many of us know you for your wellness books. You've written quite a few of those. But your third work of fiction is Unspoken. It is out right now, and it's a detective story. Some of the themes can, resonate with real life events. Tell us a little bit about what it's about.
Yeah, I'm excited about The Unspoken. It's based here in Chicago, our home city. It's basically a private investigator who used to be a detective with the Chicago Police Department. He leaves the force because he won't participate in the cover-up of a bad police shooting. We all know about that. So he leaves the force, He becomes a private investigator, hangs up his shingle in the South Loop, and basically his first case is a wealthy North Shore girl who suddenly disappears, and her very aristocratic mother comes down to the South Loop, finds our private investigator, our man Ash Kane, and asks him to help find her missing daughter. So the book is really an ode to Chicago, though. Chicago is a character. We go to the South Side, to the West Side, to the North Side, to the lake, all the different restaurants. So though I'm excited for Chicagoans to read this book because you're going to recognize all these places that all of us are frequent so often in our regular daily lives.
Now, writing crime fiction, I know this is your third work of fiction, but it's still, sort of a shift from what we're used to seeing you do, Dr. Smith. How did you make that shift from wellness and medicine to crime fiction?
Well, I've always been a lover of mystery and thrillers and suspense, always. I've always read it, I've always watched it and written for myself with it. But here's the key. The key is that I was telling someone earlier today, doctors are more than just doctors. Doctors can be musicians, they can be artists, they can be authors. So it's not really a transition. It's something I've always had a passion for, and I'm excited to do it. I love telling great stories. I love being held myself captive by great stories, and I want to do the same to readers. The book just got optioned to become a TV series, so fingers crossed it gets sold to a network. But yeah, it's a real passion of mine. It's fun, and it's just very engaging.
And of course, congrats on that. Before we let you go, of course, as cases are surging of COVID, Thanksgiving is this week. How will you be observing the holiday, and what is your advice to the rest of us?
My family will be observing it very quietly at home. We will talk to our loved ones who are in other cities and other states via Zoom or the phone. But listen, this is not a joke. We have to take this very seriously. We have a lot of cases. The numbers are through the roof, and there is light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine. So if everyone can just slow down, be patient, we're going to get through this, but let's not have more detriment occur as we're waiting for the vaccines to take hold. So everyone just be patient.
Again, that was a conversation that originally aired last Sunday on Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And now, Paris, we go back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. He's a master of violin, singing, songwriting, and whistling. Chicago area native Andrew Bird has long been celebrated for his blending of styles and multiple hit albums. He's applied those talents to a new Christmas album called Hark, and he's also added a new skill to his resume, acting. Bird is featured in the new season of Fargo on FX, which was shot right here in Chicago. Here's a clip where Bird comes to Chris Rock's character to pay off a loan.
Since you were nice enough to give us that loan, I figured I should bring it to you straight away.
So he left you this bag of cash.
Your uncle, what was it? Booley. No, sir. His bequeathment came in check form. I just figured cash would be easier for you.
And musician and actor Andrew Bird joins us now. Andrew Bird, thank you so much for being back here on Chicago Tonight.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
So this Fargo clip, you get a call out of the blue, never having acted before, to play this mild-mannered undertaker in the latest season of Fargo, and then you film it in your hometown of Chicago. What was that entire experience like?
It was terrifying, but it was, what I keep saying is it was to come back to a place so familiar to me as Chicago and to do something so unfamiliar to me, something I'd never done before, was kind of a strange experience. But I think I was glad to be in Chicago, have something I knew what was going on with, yeah.
And I remember when they were filming in places like Rogers Park, I'm sure locations that were really familiar to you. A lot of us cringe when we see ourselves on the screen. What was your reaction?
My reaction was, I've been watching it weekly like everybody else, and because I've never seen myself on screen before, so I want to know if I pulled it off or not. I had no idea when I was doing it whether I was measuring up to the other actors, or I really hadn't given acting a thought before this came up. So it was the whole thing was a big adventure, I have to say.
I think you definitely pulled it off and more. All right, let's talk about Hark, which is just a beautiful album. It's a mix of some reworked, traditional songs and some new music that you created. What drew you to sort of adding to the canon of holiday music?
Well, it's you have to admit that Christmas album is a nostalgic exercise, if there ever was one. But I really wanted to try to refresh the canon. You know, we've got the same 10 songs or so kicking around every year, and that's, you know, reminds us what time of year it is. But you know, now and then we could use some new entries. So I picked some. I wrote some originals, and I picked some unusual covers that I thought qualified as holiday tunes.
I want to talk, and I want to talk about some of those covers in a second. But let's listen to one of your originals here, "Christmas in April."
I'm writing a song about Christmas in April this year, and you know, folks, I don't know what to think about that. I'm hoping these words don't ring so hollow when you hear me say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
And I read where you wrote this at the beginning of the pandemic. How has COVID-19 and the general unrest in the country sort of impacted your creative process and what you ultimately came up with here?
Yeah, I mean, when it first hit, I was actually in Chicago filming Fargo, and I had to come home right away. And there were these, you know, everyone went through these stages of acceptance. Week after week, we're like, oh, wow, this is going to go on for quite a bit. And at first, I, like a lot of my creative friends, were having a little trouble being creative at first because it was so all-consuming and not necessarily something you feel like writing about. And then I thought I would finish out this you know, Hark, the Christmas album, because I did half of it the year before, and I thought, well, why don't I just make it a complete album? And that song, Christmas in April, I actually wrote it in March, but March is not a very lyrical word. But I was thinking the same thing that probably millions of people were thinking, which how often can you say something like that? But I was, you know, wondering where we're going to be when the holidays come around, and whether we're going to be able to see our families, and wondering if traditional greetings of Merry Christmas and Happy New Year are going to feel disingenuous because everyone's going to be in a pretty dark place. And I found myself wondering aloud in the middle of the song what it means that I'm even writing this song in April, you know? That's kind of the kind of thing you write during a pandemic, because it's very self-referential, and you know, I'm just puzzling through it as I'm writing it.
And speaking of, you know, where you're going to be, you know, usually this time of year you're getting ready for your annual residency of concerts at the Fourth Presbyterian Church right off Michigan Avenue. These are really big concerts for your fans. For our viewers, tell us why these are such special concerts and what it feels like to not be able to do them this year.
Well, it's become a tradition. The idea I had maybe, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago now, to do these concerts called Gezelligheid, which is a Dutch word that means cozy, roughly. And I wanted to play in a sacred space with a lot of reverb and ambiance, and play a solo concert where I can just kind of, you know, you don't want to bring drums into a church. It's all about creating these sort of linear sounds and really enjoying the sound of your instrument bouncing off the walls. And I wanted to create like a cozy kind of collective experience that helps us get through the dark days of the Chicago winter. And it really kind of took on a life of its own, and it evolves from year to year, but it also stays the same in a lot of ways. And I don't generally do Christmas tunes as a rule. It's just sort of a seasonal, ambient concert. But I really come to look forward to them coming home to Chicago and spending a week, and I play like 5 or 6 shows in a row with the Fourth Presbyterian, and it's some of my favorite shows I do ever. Yeah.
And as I understand, you're going to be live streaming that concert this year on December 13th in lieu of in person. And by the way, we had Andrew Bird on our show in 2001. You can watch that whole story on our website. And now, my thanks to Andrew Bird.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7.
And we leave you tonight with some more of Andrew Bird's new Christmas album called Hark. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and good night.
I'm wanting to hold you and keep you with me this year. You're my darling, and I want you near. I'm wanting to whisper these words of comfort in your ear. No more sorrow and no more fear. Oh, my love, when will we know if we can meet under the mistletoe?
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of their attorneys selected for the 2020 Illinois Super Lawyers List.